it's Tracey McMillan, and today I'm going to do a webinar for you on divorce. Now, once the divorce is filed, you're going to be provided with your documents back. So you press the button, you've paid the fee, you've uploaded all your support documents, great. What you're going to get back in return then is you're going to get a couple of things. You're going to get a sealed copy of your divorce application. So what you filed will now come back to you with a beautiful red round stamp on it. Okay, that will be down the bottom of the document somewhere. Up the top in the right hand corner will be a little box, and it will have the date, it will have a time, and it will have an address. And this is about your court appearance date. So this will tell you when your court date is. So it'll be, let's say it's the 23rd of May and it will usually be, depending upon which registry you're in, so which state, it will be either 9:30 a.m. or 9 a.m. or it will be like 11 a.m. Or even 2, depending upon which lot you go through with. Now, let me be clearer to you about what that date means. It does not mean that you rock up at 10 past. So if the court date and time is 9:10, you don't rock up at, if it's at 9 a.m., you do not rock up at 10 past 9. You do not rock up at 5 past 9. You must expect to actually be ready to go into the court at 9 o'clock. Now, I can tell you the amount of times I've seen people turn up late and their matter has already been heard. So if you have a very efficient judge, which there are a lot around, they don't want their time being wasted. They want to get you in and get you out as quickly as possible. So if you are late, you run the risk that the matter's heard. If you're not there, they will not bring it on. They are not interested in whether you've had a car accident. They're not interested in whether you missed a train. They don't care. So as a result, please try to be at the court, aim to be there at least half an hour before, if not an hour. Doesn't matter, you bring a book, sit around, just wait, that's fine. But make sure that you're there on time. Now, in addition with that application for your divorce application that comes back with the seal, what it's also going to give you is it's going to give you a sealed copy of the affidavit for e-filing. So it'll show that it's been filed and what day, what time, things like that. That is important because you're going to need those documents for service. Okay, so we're going to go through and do your service documents. So once you have those documents in your hand, you now have to decide how you're going to serve it. So again, if you have a joint application, you don't actually have to go through this process. So if you're doing it on your own without, involvement from your spouse, then you'll have to go through this process. So you will have to decide at the very least whether you're going to try and serve it by post or whether you're going to serve it by hand. That's your first decision. If you're going to serve it by post, if spouse refuses to accept it or doesn't collect it from the post office or anything, then you're going to have to then go through the process of going and serving it by hand. So if you don't want to do that risk of them not engaging in the process with you, then I would highly recommend it is much better for you to just bypass service by post and go straight to delivering it to them by hand. Okay? Now, here are some of the time limits. If your spouse is living in Australia, you must, and this is absolutely crucial, must have served a copy of the application for a divorce and all supporting documents to them at least 28 days prior to the divorce hearing date. So the box up in the right corner must be at least 28 days prior to then. If you have not, they will adjourn your matter off for that 28 days to be heard. That allows someone time to get their documents together, to potentially respond, time to turn up to court. Now, if your spouse does not live in Australia, so they're overseas, then you must serve them with a copy of the documents at least 42 days prior to the court date. Okay, again, if you haven't done it, if the documents only got to them 30 days out, then you're going to have to explain to the court, no, you haven't had that time frame. There is an exception. If they've signed an acknowledgement of service and they acknowledge it, the court may actually hear it. But if they haven't and they haven't engaged in the process, the court's going to adjourn it and wait for that 42 days to have lapsed. Now, once you've decided whether you can serve it via post or in person, then you've got a process. So let's go through what happens when you serve it via post. So to serve your application by post, these are the documents you're going to have to send. Firstly, when you're sending all of these, you need to send it via registered post, and you need to make sure that you are requesting someone to sign for the documents and give you a receipt back to confirm that that's happened. Okay, if you haven't got that, you haven't got evidence of it actually being served by post. So it's really important that you keep all that information from Australia Post. So the documents you're going to have to file and send is one, the sealed application for a divorce. So that's the document you filed online, which comes back with the red round stamp on it. Okay, that's the one with the court date up in the top right corner. That's the first one. You're going to have to give them also a copy of your affidavit of e-filing, which just shows when you filed it and what time, etc. In addition to that, you're going to have to give them a copy of the marriages, separations and families brochure. And that's a document which is it's a printed out brochure. You can actually get it off the federal court website. And we'll put a link up here for you so as you actually know what the website is for you to get the document. In addition, what you would also do is send an acknowledgement of service form. You just print it out. You can get a copy of it on Concourts if you like, just print it out. And it's just blank. You don't have to fill in any of the pages. It's up to them to fill it in. Then you also want to send, it's really important, a stamped self-addressed envelope with your return address of whether to send it. If you don't do that, the odds are no one's ever going to send it back because it would require an effort. So you want to make sure you avoid those roadblocks by sending that envelope. Now, with that acknowledgement of service, fingers crossed, if your service via post works, he or she would have signed the acknowledgement of service and sent it back to you. If they don't, then you're going to have to go through and do the affidavit of service by hand. But if they do send back the acknowledgement of service, you'll have their signature on the bottom of it. From that, you're actually going to have to do an affidavit of service by post, which is basically just the affidavit of service, and you just tick that you sent it by post. But you're also going to have to complete the affidavit of proving signature component. And that outlines why you say it's their signature and how you can prove it. So a really easy way to do is if you have a copy of their license or some document that they've signed in the past, you can attach it to that to say, this is why I say it's his signature or her signature. So you can prove that it's actually got to the correct person. Now, when you're signing all of these, I just want to state all these documents need to be actually signed in the presence of a Justice of the Peace or a Commissioner of Declarations, which is still what you would understand as a JP, or a lawyer. One of those things people will be fine, but you do have to actually have these certified and sworn. Now, again, if you haven't received that acknowledgement of service back, then the best way is actually to go through and do service by hand. So this is what happens. This is service by hand. Then the person who's serving it by hand has to be over 18 and it can't be you. Okay, you can't serve your own documents because you could say, oh yes, I served him, but doesn't mean it actually occurred. So the court want to know that this person's actually being given appropriate documents to know that there's something going on about them in court. So with that, All right, so the documents that you need to file or serve when you're actually serving by hand are these. You need your application for a divorce. You need your affidavit of the e-filing. You need your marriages, families and separations brochure. You will give them an acknowledgement of service form to fill out as well if you want to. And a stamped self-addressed envelope again, okay? Now, the only difference is this doesn't go in the post this time. This gets handed to them. So, to prove effective service by hand, then the server must clearly identify your spouse. So, if you're giving it to a family member, they can say that when they do their affidavit of service, they can say, I know that this is the person we're giving it to because they're my brother-in-law, right? And I know this person, right, intimately. If you're using somebody who doesn't know them, let's say it's a friend that you've made after you've separated, or you're using a professional or some third party who's never met them, then I highly recommend give them a photo of him or her, and give them the full name of the person and the address of where they live or where they're working or where they're going to be located. So when they do, they've got to go up to give the documents over. They've got to identify the person. So the easiest way is this: hey, Billy, Bob, Jane Smith. And usually the response from people will go, that's not me, or yeah, what? Or they acknowledge it in some manner. All you have to do is get the acknowledgement from them. So in the affidavit is, I asked the person, are you Billy, Bob, Jane Smith? Person said, yeah, why? That's enough to identify the person. If they say, no, not me, but they have a photograph of the person, that is enough for them to say, I identified them because I had a visual, and they can even attach a photocopy of the photograph with the affidavit to say that's how I know I'm handing it to the right person instead of Joe Blogs down the road. So that's number one. Number two is when they ask and they've acquired that they've got to give service. Number three is they've then got to deliver them to your spouse. So you can walk up and hand something to somebody, but they don't have to accept it, right? So what do you do if they don't accept it? You do this. Let me make it simple. You go, yep, Billy, Bob, Jane Smith. And they go, yep. You go, you're served. That's all you have to do. You can drop it at their feet. You can go, they're served, and leave it there. You do not have to tell them what they have been served with. You do not have to have them take it. I have seen all manners of service of documents. Basically, all you have to do is leave the documents behind in some way and leave. Once they have done that, that is great. So the only other thing I want to raise in relation to that is if you knock on the door of where the person is meant to be residing and somebody other than the person who they have the photograph of or know answers the door, you can say, are they there? If they say no, they're not at the moment. You just say, the things that a server would say is, okay, I need to, can I leave these documents here for you to give them? Will you do that? If the person who has to be over 18 says, yep, that's fine, I'll give it to them, that is enough for you to prove service as well, because you're leaving it with the person there to hand it over. You'll then have to get them to, you'll have to figure out who it is you're actually talking to so they can give you the name to prove that service. So that's actually another way you can get around it as well. But once you've done the service by hand and it's all been immaculate and the person who's serving it has done such a wonderful job, they've got to come back and they've got to swear an affidavit of service. So they've got to write down what was actually said. Don't paraphrase, please. So if you hand over the documents and he says, get stuffed, I'm not going to take it, or F off, then you put in your affidavits. I said, hi, are you Billy Bob Jane Smith? This person responded, get stuffed, I'm not accepting that. And that is what you actually write, word for word, verbatim. You don't have to be polite here. The courts want to know exactly what was said, all right? That's really important. Then you fill out that affidavit. Once you've filled out the affidavit, you'll need to then go in and file it back online in ComCourts, okay? So you go back into ComCourts, you upload the affidavit of service, click the button that says it's the affidavit of service and file it. That is so as the courts will know what you've actually done.